I see that someone has problems with the audio here. I don't know if that goes for everyone. Okay, not for everyone. Then it could be that you need to change the settings under that little arrow next to the microphone button. Then you can choose the audio output or your speakers. So just see if that's possible for you to change, and hopefully you will hear us then, Anna. But hey, that means that the chat is working at least, so we're having a good communication there. Things are trickling in. Super happy about that. Now it's 9:02, so I think that we can slowly but surely kick it off here. So first of all, again, welcome to everyone that's joining us on this sunny Friday. Those of you who were a bit early, we're playing a little bit of party music here to get everyone in a good Friday mood. Really fun that so many of you want to join this webinar today. Before I introduce our wonderful speakers, I just wanted to tell you who I am, for those of you who don't know me. My name is Michelle. I work as CEO at the SaaS company Wintrgarden. And we have a talent attraction platform that helps organizations to build and engage their talent pipelines. So, solution for employer branding and talent acquisition professionals that want to become proactive in their talent attraction process. And that's really why this topic is so close to our heart, finding and attracting diverse talent out there. And I think it's not really a discussion that diversity is clearly linked to business success. There has been multiple studies about that. But I think the main pain point is always, how do you actually find people that are different from the people that you already have in your organization? And that's really what we want to focus on today. And that's why I invited my fantastic speaker panel today. We have Leonam. You work with people and performance at the scale up Hedvig and are challenging the traditional insurance industry. So really fun to have you here today. And you will also be our first speaker of the day. So super fun to have you. Then we have Kristin. Kristin Berg, you have been a tech CEO for many years. And your most recent career switch or change is that you have become the CEO for Teknikkvinnor. And Teknikkvinnor is, as I understand, the biggest network for females and non-binaries in tech in Sweden. How many members do you have?
31,700.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So fun. And I'm actually part of your Facebook group.
Happy to have you.
I'm really appreciating those discussions. So just a tip for everyone who wants to join Teknikkvinnor. It's a super fun network and really open discussions and a lot of support there. And then last but not least, we have you, Nazanin. You work as sales director at Microsoft Sweden. But not only that, you have another role at Microsoft. You are also the diversity and inclusion lead in Sweden. So we are very curious to find out what that means, and we're super happy to have you here today. Before we kick this off, a couple of technical things. I just wanted to give you some instructions how this webinar is set up. As you might have noticed, the participants are muted during the course of the webinar. That's because there's so many of you that it will just be a bit difficult for us here. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to interact. I really hope we're going to have a really good discussion. And that's why we have our little chat window that many of you have already found. You found that on the bottom of your Zoom interface, probably under those 3 little dots. So during the course of this webinar, at any point in time, if you have a question, please write your question in the chat. Because at the end of this webinar we will have a panel discussion and we will shoot all of your questions to Kristin, Nazanin and Leo. So very welcome to shoot your questions in the chat, and we also have our fantastic Emma from Wintrgarden who is going to be moderating the chat. So any problems, questions, thoughts, please just post them in the chat. And As I said in the very beginning, in case you haven't been here yet, this webinar is being recorded, and that also means that you will get the recording of this afterwards. We won't use any slides today. We felt like, okay guys, we have been looking at digital documents for the whole week, so let's focus on the conversation today. And instead you will receive a written summary from us afterwards, also over email. So no slides today, but you will get the summary afterwards. In terms of the agenda, we will have 3 different parts. I will first have a good discussion with you, Leo. Then we will move over to Kristin. And last but not least, we will have Nazanin. And in the very end, as I said, we will have time for a couple of minutes for a panel discussion where we happily take questions from the audience. So that's the agenda for today. I would say we're almost ready to kick it off. I just want to make sure everyone finds the chat. So I'm just going to ask a question now. I really want to know from the audience, what are your expectations for today? Just leave like 1 or 2 meanings in the chat, then we know the chat works and that you all have found the chat. So let us know, what do you expect from today? Let's see if something trickles in here. 1 or 2 words are enough. Let's see. Here we go. New perspectives, to be inspired. I hope that we can deliver on those expectations. How to measure diversity. Gain more perspectives. Perfect. Keep it coming so we can hopefully live up to your expectations there. I would say this means the chat is working and we are ready to kick this off without further ado. Leo, what do you say?
Yes, I'm ready to go.
So fun. Super happy to have you here, and I introduced you very shortly, but I think that we'll kick this off by a presentation of yourself, and also please include what connects you to the topic of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Michelle. So as you've mentioned before, I'm at the moment a talent partner at Hedvig. So a lot of my current responsibility, it is around talent attraction, talent acquisition, and then after making sure that we hire great people, how we can actually grow them inside the organization, right? Worth mentioning that my workforce at the moment, it's average age 27. So I'll come back to that in the future as well. And before Hedvig, I have 10 years of experience within organizational development, sort of supporting talent and people topics in organizations that are either wanting to transform or they are in early stage and sort of wanting to begin processes on people. Why diversity is important to me, besides being a big sort of business driver for what I will do, is the fact of my life story, I guess. So I was born in Brazil. My family comes from different parts of the world, and then I was actually raised in multiple countries. So usually I tell people that I'm a third country grown up. Been in Sweden for now 7 years, so I identify myself as immigrants in the country, trying to do my best to understand the Swedishness. I can see that a lot of you are Swedes. Besides that, I also identify myself as a queer man. So that has been a big, interesting topic to sort of understand how to position that in the workforce. So yeah, very excited to talk about the topic today.
So fun to have you here today, Leonam, and so fun that you chose Sweden. I'm also not from Sweden, so really nice that we met here in Stockholm. And that's also one of the reasons, of course, we have international guests today as well, but one of the reasons we're speaking English today. But let's start with a bit more serious question, Leo, and also become a bit personal right away. Have you ever experienced yourself that things have not been as inclusive and open in a work environment for you?
Yeah, I was thinking a bit about this before the webinar, and I have a couple of different examples, but I think one of the best ones, which may sound a bit silly, but it was quite significant to me growing up in Sweden, was something around the language. So I've been into quite diverse spaces. As we know, the country needs international talents since we keep growing our economy, and it's quite hard to find just Swedish local talents. And I've been into, and a lot of the organizations that I've been part of have had a policy of we only speak English when we are here. But that hasn't been the case 100% of the times. I've been in a meeting once, which I was the only non-Swedish born and raised out of 9 people. And then I remember one of the senior managers in the table said, like, he looked at me and said, is it okay if we take this in Swedish? And then at the time, I was an agile coach, so I was responsible for facilitating the discussion and, getting people to express themselves and so on. And that felt harsh, because I understand the perspective of like, you are in your own country, and of course it is easier for one to speak in your native language, right? It is easier for me to communicate in Portuguese. However, we as an organization believe that we want to include all types of people in the discussions, right? So I remember that at that time, I actually decided to leave the room. I told them, like, it's okay, you guys can continue having this discussion in Swedish and let me know afterwards. And I felt a bit cheated, like a bit defeated in some ways. And then I've done a lot of thinking around it more and more. And whenever, like, now I go and apply for a new job, that's actually one of the questions that I ask the recruiter and the hiring team on, like, what is your real perspective of your English level? Like, are you comfortable in talking in that language and so on?
I think that goes together with actually walking the talk, because often in job ads it says, no Swedish speaking requirement. But then when you actually get into the culture, and that's one thing about talking maybe Swedish by the coffee machine, but another thing is like, I have actually the same experience as you, and it's just not very nice if you then have that wake-up call when you've already accepted the role and you feel like, okay, I don't actually fit in from that perspective. Like, this is not really what was discussed in the recruiting process. So but you also remember when we talked before this webinar, had an example of basically the opposite on the other end of the spectrum. I thought maybe you could share that too.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's very exciting. I mean, I've been in another organization in another time that is quite international by default. They have loads of nationalities in the building, part of a top 200. And I remember that at that time, there were a lot of leadership guidelines of, like, when you enter the building, you speak English as much as you can, unless, of course, if you really need to speak Swedish, maybe you're going to go on a one-on-one or like on a closed room, so it doesn't feel to the environment that you're not inclusive. And I thought it was very exciting to like see my team was still quite Swedish, but like seeing, I was not even paying attention. I was just like, walking around or taking a look at my emails and seeing them speaking English all the time. And that made me, I don't know how much you will associate with this, but that truly made me feel inclusive of, like, they're seeing me, they understand that they appreciate the diversity of it. And as I've said, like, if they have to speak Swedish, they would do that in a space that I don't get, seen on it.
I think that's really powerful, and also respect to your former colleagues there. And language is, of course, only one example, but it's such an apparent example how you can be inclusive in a corporate culture or be actually more exclusive, I think. So thanks for sharing that. But now we know that you definitely have reflected on this topic. So I want to know from you, how can an employer actually become attractive to people that are different in age, culture, ethnicity, language, origin, gender, sexual orientation? Like, I mean, that's a challenge. How do you do that?
That's the golden question, right? That's 2022. That's a great point. Usually when I drive these conversations at workspaces, I try to identify them into different angles. So like, one is around awareness and the other one is around engagement. So when I think about awareness, firstly, when you're trying to do talent management, hopefully you have some sort of process in how to do talent planning, right? So like, what kind of competences and how many new hires you want to have in a sort of forecasts. From there, after you have a clear understanding of what competences do you need, then it's quite much easier for you to talk about diversity in the sense of like, what is diversity for the organization? Like, what do you stand for when it comes of diversity? And then how do you want to measure? So there's something around just putting out the word diversity won't mean much. There's something else when you want to talk about diversity, if it is connected to, do you want to attract more non-males? Do you want to attract people from different cultures? Do you want to attract things around age or whatever you think, some sort of things that are missing, it's important. And even before that, I just realized something that I forgot to mention. It's something, the connection with the business, right? So it's not like we want to only, it's not the talent agenda of like, oh yes, I need to increase the percentage of females in leadership positions because that's trendy right now. It's not that. It's because the business understands that having diverse profiles will increase your business reach. You will understand better your customers better, right? We know that right now the world is changing really fast. So the way that you do product development, the way that you do innovation has to be connected with different perspectives. And then you want to find the beauty of that in some ways, right? So all of those topics are about reach. I know some of the other panels are going to talk more about that later on. And then there's something around engagement, right? Which is maybe very connected to talent acquisition per se. So when you think about engagement, I think of like, okay, maybe you have identified what kind of talent groups do you want to focus on reaching out? And then it's around, what are you doing to invest on that? So if you want to have people that are from outside your country, what are you actually doing to go there and reach it? So, you know, like a lot of the times people, they come to me and they say, but people don't apply. Like women in technology, less women apply for roles, right? And that's the case because there are less women that have studied maybe engineering. So then what are you doing for those women that are currently studying engineering, or like where, you know, what are they and how are you positioning yourself to attract them and begin a dialogue? So when I think about engagement, I also, you know, I will encourage all of you guys to not only talking about women empowerment on the International Women's Day, which happens once a year, instead doing that as an ongoing dialogue and sort of making sure that that's part of the business investments on, you know, showing that you care, that you have a stand for it, and that, yeah, keep trying on different ways to see if they apply more.
I think that's so good tips. I've actually on that point with International Women's Day, I saw, maybe some of you have seen that as well on LinkedIn, that advertising from a big marketing agency, I think in London, where they have these big sort of banners, and it says like, imagine a CEO, and then like it says in very small letters, you thought it was a man, right? Or imagine someone picking up their kids, it was a woman, right? I think that's so powerful. I want to have those, like maybe those banners somewhere in my office, not only on the International Women's Day, but actually like the whole year round, because it's just so powerful that we're still thinking in those terms today. So yeah. I think you're totally right. It's about continuous work, right? So super important. Moving on to one of your passion topics, if I may call it that, but we are talking a bit about Generation Z, and Generation Z are people born after 96, right? And they are supposed to be the most racially, ethnically, and also sexually diverse generation in history. But, and here comes the but, Generation Z is not super fond of big corporations. So my question to you, Leo, how can companies, and then especially in that case, big corporations, become attractive to this generation?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't know if I know all of it in a way. I tried to do my best at the moment. But coming to what you said, Michelle, yes, I do think that, and firstly, I'm a millennial. I was born in '89. So I don't want to sound like I'm a massive Gen Z expert, but I try to do my best working attracting them right now. And I think, as you've mentioned, a lot of the Gen Zs right now, since they were raised with the internet, they can go and create their own business by themselves, right? So one of the first questions that I try to ask myself is, why would someone want to work for me? And when I say me, I mean my organization, my team, me as a leader, you know, a bunch of other types of actors. Trying to have these dialogues within the current staff that you have is quite important for you to sort of dive into a new way of doing value proposition, that it's not the same old EVP that we've seen in so many career sites by now, just with some wording changes, on truly what we believe in, like what make us stand out. And then I think there is a lot of things when we are trying to attract the Gen Zs on maybe trying to be transparent and to clarify the reasons of like, why is it important for you to try to grow an organization or to develop your team skills, abilities, or maybe even trying to be transparent that things are not perfect. So it's not like you're going to join an organization and things are, you know, peach perfect. Like I'm sure that all of us are struggling and having different types of challenges, right? So we can also try to position ourselves of saying these are the kind of challenges that you will have in this experience. You can decide if that's an exciting challenge or not, and then kind of connect it on into their growth. So I think that a lot of Gen Zs, because of their, if I may anxieties. They want to know how much they can grow. And then coming back to that, I think an organization like a talent and a people team have to have some sort of clarity on like, how do you do career progression? What kind of benefits do you offer? How do you do learnings? What kind of initiatives are you continuously planning to develop? And then also ask your employees like what's important for them. And then coming to, as a last point, I think there is a provocation that I do on, I've learned a lot of people, with a lot of like my leaders who have 20 plus years of more experience than I have. So it's also kind of part of a talent partner to engage Gen Zs and say, I understand that it's really fun for you to work with your friends on YouTube right now, but there's a lot of really valuable lessons of maybe being led or worked by someone who has 10 years plus of leadership experience with marketing. And then kind of like sell that leadership example of like, I want to learn from that person. That person will take me serious. They will make me want to grow here and not just look at me as maybe a 25-year-old entry level that maybe some of us in our generation have been treated when we started. So, there's a lot of those types of things that I would try to wrap it up as something as called as a dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you mentioned a really good point here, this kind of co-mentoring relationship, talking more about values, talking more about personal growth and development rather than talking about salary and title, which in my world, Leo, I call us the same generation, was more relevant when we started our careers than it is for Gen Z today. So I think super interesting points. I will ask you one last question. And I could talk with you for a whole webinar, but one last question, 1 minute answer. So to summarize, what are your 3 main tips to build a diverse talent pipeline?
Firstly, clarify what is diversity for you as an organization and start from the business in out. And know how to measure it. So that's first point. And second, have a clarity on, after you know which diverse talent groups do you want to attract more, start from there. And then thirdly, invest. So I acknowledge that it's a journey. All of us are on this together, and it's just an error and trial on like making sure that you're always investing and trying to see what works and what doesn't. So those would be my 3 things. And think of like the long-term perspective of things, right? So you're not gonna just maybe create results in in a 6 weeks time, but in a 6 years time, hopefully you will be seen as an organization that truly admires diversity as a core, and it's seen as, I want to go to that organization because they believe in that. So
true. Thank you so much, Leo. And we'll talk more in the panel. But now I want to move over to you, Kristin. So first question to you, like, who are you and how have you become so engaged with the topic of diversity and inclusion throughout your career?
Yes. So as a person, I would say that I'm a really curious person. I really love to listen, and I really love conversation that engage. And I like that because that way I learn new things. And instead of hearing myself saying all the things I've already experienced and already know. I've been in tech since 1997, so many years. I have worked in small Swedish companies, big Nordic corporations, and also global companies. And I'm now, as you said, the CEO of Teknikkvinnor, who has this community with over 31,700 women who have an interest in tech. And I love that. And we lead that inclusive community and make it a place where people can grow. And also we work with many companies, working with managers, helping them become more inclusive so that they can become diverse and gender equal. And why have I become so engaged with diversity over the course of my career? Really because it's common sense. I would say it's fair, it's fun, it's exciting, it's equal value for all. It gives your company great competitive advantage. It makes you as a person grow. And I love the feeling when I walk into a room or an office where people have the different perspectives. It's like fireworks. And I love that feeling, and you can never quite know what to expect. It has a great learning curve, and you will never learn all there is to know. So that's why I'm engaged, because like I said, I'm a curious person. I like to grow, and that's how you learn. You're never fully, you don't know all the things that there is to know. It's always trying your best, and it's again about being equal and having the same rights, opportunity, and obligations.
Right. So you're also saying you enjoy the ride because, yeah, as you said,
Yes.
we're not really there yet. So, um,
Nope.
but tell me just shortly a little bit, what's your mission now with Teknikkvinnor? Because I know that you've taken over the CEO position. I think it was in September last year, so not that long ago.
Yeah.
So why that, and what's your mission?
Our mission is making tech as equally accessible to all, and making the tech business culture more inclusive and gender equal. Our mission is that we should not be needed, and we can agree that we're not quite there yet. And also our mission is that all businesses within tech should be equal and inclusive. So that's our vision and mission, as well as mine.
I love that you said that your mission is to not be needed in the future. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in with you as well into that, the Holy Grail. I mean, we do have as people a bias to like people that are similar to us, right?
Yeah.
So how can we overcome that and as a company attract people that are different to our current employees?
Yeah. I think that my best advice would be to look in uncommon places. And if you're looking to hire, you should hire for potential, not the actual skill set. I would question all things about how you recruit today, and have an honest conversation with yourself and others of what you actually need, and what you can question about your old truths and habits, and how you have recruited ongoing. And it starts with the company culture. The culture has to be based on humility and curiosity, being bold, and you have to have a dedication for inclusiveness.
You had a really powerful example when we talked before the meeting today of how you can recruit for potential rather than for skill set.
Right.
Maybe you could share that with the audience.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's about thinking outside the box. I think that the example that you're thinking about was when I was the CEO of a software company. I hired from restaurants and hotels for positions such as, for example, IT consultants and help desk functions. I once hired a girl named Karin, and she was working as a waitress. And I first met her at a dinner with friends, and we had a conversation about her wanting to get into a new role. So we just connected, and then I hired her because of her ambition to grow, and also about her personality that is all about giving service to the customer. And if you think about it, IT support and consultant work is all about getting service or providing service to customers and finding new solutions. And in hotels and restaurants, you always have to find a new solution to serve the customer. So and she's she is the super fast learner, and she studied Java and SQL when she was commuting on the bus. And within a year, she was our most profitable IT consultant. And within 2 years, she was in the management team as the leader of the IT help desk function.
Wow, I think this is an amazing example. This is exactly walking the talk and not just talking about it. I think that's super powerful. Time flies today, so I think that we have to even round this off now, you and me. And my last question is the same that I asked to Leo. What are your 3 main takeaways when it comes to building a diverse talent pipeline?
I think I keep coming back to the same theme. Be brave and curious. You have to challenge yourself. You have to challenge your organization. You have to look in new places. You have to think differently. You have to find the blue oceans. So dare to fail. And make it about your business. The business, your people are actually your most important asset.
Thank you so much, Kristin. And we'll talk more in the panel. But now we go over to Nazanin. Welcome.
Hello.
Last but not least on the agenda today. Well, shoot us with an introduction of yourself and also the role that you have today.
Sure. So Nazanin Nematshahi, I work as a sales director here at Microsoft and also sitting in the Swedish leadership group and work as the D&I lead at Microsoft. And I've been here for about a year now and have been around 14 years in the IT business. Right. So a lot like Kristin.
And so you said you're a sales director, but you also are the diversity and inclusion lead at Microsoft. What does that role entail in practice?
So why they are connecting someone from sales and leadership to D&I, it's so that it shouldn't be a role that is nice to have thinking outside of the business. It's basically because we need to connect it to the business, right? So my role there is to make sure that diversity and inclusion is focused and connected to the business, how we measure it, how we can learn best practices from a Western Europe community of practice, and also how we talk with our customers more externally around it and engage customers in tough discussions, and also how we empower internally our employees. So it's an external, an internal, and a business question, which I love.
That's amazing. And now speaking of connecting it to the business, so how do you measure D&I at Microsoft?
So we measure it differently. So first of all, we measure it by really connecting it to the business in two ways. First of all, we look at really measuring in leadership positions, how many women do we actually have? So for example, in the Swedish leadership, we are 46% women in the leadership group, and the full leaders in Microsoft Sweden, 50%. That's because we are actually measuring every organization on how we are doing in getting women in tech.
And
the next
jump in the comment there, because I think often we see that companies measure like their full staff in terms of, okay, how many men, how many women. But I think especially in tech, what we see is that the further you go up in leadership positions, the less women there actually are. So if you just take the average, all layers, you're not really representing how much influence women have in the organization.
And that's the thing, right? So in my previous work, we were measuring, we are doing it at Microsoft as well. How are we doing overall? Yeah. But what's happening there is that we are hiring, exactly as Kristin said, people with potential in entry-level, early in career positions. But as longer up you go, it's become thinner and thinner. So hence having people actually making the decisions, having diverse perspective, not only from a women perspective, but I'm from Iran, just as Leo, coming with different perspectives from a cultural difference as well, and other types of differences really creates innovation, which we need as a tech company, right? All the way up, our Western Europe leadership team is 55% women. It's just going all the way up, and that creates real change, both in the recruitment, but also. The second thing, I know Leo talked about investing. I have half of my salary based on soft values on how I am accountable driving D&I, not as a D&I lead. All employees at Microsoft get paid on how they drive diversity and inclusion and collaboration within their teams. That is investing money. So from a cultural standpoint, we want to attract people that really wants to engage in this type of questions. Otherwise, you don't even get your full pay. So that's quite a change maker and powerful in my eyes.
Definitely, that's really strong. And we talked about this before we met today, but why, in your opinion, is it so important to actually create a truly inclusive culture? And you can also include there how. I mean, we mentioned a few topics, but I think you definitely have more to say on that.
Sure. So for me, it's all about the why is, for me, when you have a lot of perspectives in the room, you actually create an innovation power. And for us, that means better products, better customer obsessions and dialogues with our customers, which in the end gets us better results. I can give you an example. We have a product called an AE product that we actually started to use in the recruitment process to see how can we automate the recruitment process. And just having no touch, a human touch on the process, the AI measurements just looked at what have we been hiring the last 40 years on this job. And the top 10 CVs was from 40 plus, 54 plus white male. That is that responsible AI for me. So it's super important to get these different perspectives in when we develop our products, when we talk about our products, and when we go out and really sell it to our customers. So the innovation part is one key. The second thing is how we actually attract and retain people. I came here, and the first question I asked is, I just came out of a maternity leave. I have a 1-year-old daughter. How will you make sure I have a life balance being a high leader position at Microsoft? And they had to really explain how the culture can help me be more flexible. And the last thing for me is around the pandemic. Just look at the pandemic and the digital hybrid work that we will do. It's going to be even more important to have sustainable modern leadership driving questions to really make us connect and feel that we can be our authentic self digitally as well. So that is the 3 reasons why I think it's so important. And your second question was, so how can we create it? And I've always been in the thinking that you have to connect it to the business goals. So we don't only have a goal as what do we do as a market share or what do we do as a revenue, but we also connect it. How do we get there by creating this diverse talent? And I've always been able to connect my results to my diverse teams, which is an amazing feeling to say, look, we are the highest, best growing team based on this diverse team.
And I think like that turns it into a must have rather than a nice to have. If you actually have kind of close link also even to your personal salary, you are going to put in the time. And often if we don't do that, it just gets deprioritized. I also think that you said something really interesting there with the pandemic, because I think, I don't know, probably most of you know that, but during the pandemic, I think when it comes to gender equality, we actually moved backwards. A lot of women were put, and now I don't only want to talk about women and men, but this is a great example. We actually moved towards women more being put at home, taking care of the children, taking a backseat again. And we have to find ways now coming out of this pandemic, how can we turn that around and get the development going up again rather than moving back. So I think that's super powerful and really important to keep in mind.
And don't forget exactly what you're saying, that we kept our digital forums for D&I even during the pandemic. We even created a digital cultural awareness day around D&I, a full day which was virtual, talking about really tough questions. What can you talk about when it comes to race? How can you talk about when it comes to accessibility issues? And what do you do when you want to really create a diverse group? So we never stop that work. And that's even more important to do so when you are in new changing environments.
Yes, definitely. Super good. I would say we have to unfortunately round this off with the last question, Nazanin, now. And now I want to be very specific, but what is your 3 main tips in terms of attracting diverse talent in a talent pipeline? That means a long-term perspective.
So exactly as the Leo said, I think it's so important to connect it to business goals. So for example, how do Microsoft enable our mission to empower every person on the planet? If we can do that with a diverse talent group, people will feel a bigger purpose than just earning money and salary and go home at 5. Measure, 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 and invest. I mean, if more companies could connect D&I to their salaries, we would have so many people engaging in this and really getting a better result in the end from a bottom-up revenue point of view. And then don't forget about employee branding, collaborating with local organizations, working with LinkedIn. I mean, I don't know how much I put out there. It's because it helps me. I've created a network of over 1,000+ people that can start working for me tomorrow if I want. That is super, super diverse and not in my normal networking forums that I have in my professional work. And that is how you create a different type of pool of talent rather than just going with the normal ones.
I think that's really powerful, and I think one thing that I want to add to when it comes to networks, you said working with local networks, and I think that's also so important because not everybody is on LinkedIn and not everybody dares to apply to a role, for example, at Microsoft, because often you just expect to get a no thank you because you maybe don't fulfill those 20 requirements that are in the role description. So actually finding people in unlikely places, working with local networks, proactively seeking that interaction is so powerful. We don't have super much time left, but I would say maybe we can extend this to 9:50, so we have a couple of minutes to discuss, and everyone is going to get the recording. So if you have to jump out now, don't worry, you will get that sent to as well. Because I saw that there's a lot of questions that have come into the chat, and I thought maybe we can ask Emma to shoot us with a couple of those.
Yes, absolutely. So we start with you, Leo. You have a question from Florin. He asked about what about a company that believes that they do not need a diverse workplace? For example, they don't need to attract Gen Z.
Yeah, can you hear me? I saw the question for some time, and I've been thinking a bit about it. It's a great question. I guess it's a fundamental question on us to start on, like, why an organization doesn't currently believe in diversity, right? So coming to Nazanin's perspective of like the business sort of side of things, right? So it doesn't come out as like an HR or as a people topic. Like, do people understand that having diverse perspectives into how do we do innovation will generate us more profits? Like, it will will increase more value. And then sort of like there's loads of ways in how to engage and how to start. It's something that's going to take us more time to get there. And then maybe coming to the Gen Z perspective per se, I would say that there is also a lot of great research and like data that shows that, you know, a lot of the best developers we know right now in the world are people that are self-taught. Like, there's so much new technology out there. There's so many ways that you can like grow your business online with different types of tools, because there's that perspective of like the Gen Zs, maybe they don't have so much years of experience. So I would try to like demystify some of these like old school requirements of a job, coming back to also Kristin said of like hiring for potential, and then appreciating the beauty of like the new future sort of skill set comes from how people are learning on the streets, like on the internet, like that's how the world is right now. So, I mean, it's a very hard question to answer. I think it's an ongoing process, but it's just acknowledging that we want to change and sort of inspiring people to get there.
Thank you so much, Leo. I think that's really powerful. Emma, what do you say? We'll have time for, I think, 2 or 3 more questions, and then we'll round this off.
Absolutely. So one for you, Kristin, from Sara. Do you have any advice for a recruitment company who mostly recruit for other organizations?
Oh, what kind of advice would I give them? I think I would give them the advice to start the conversations, like Nazanin said, like have the conversations where you can actually find diverse talent and have the conversation with your customers on what they're hiring for and what kind of old truths they can actually question, and not doing the same thing all over again and again and again. I think that would be my advice, like educate themselves in bias and in norms and in diversity.
Perfect. And then I imagine this one is from Nazanin, but maybe you all could answer the question, but it's from Emmanuel. He asked, he says the measurement is important to work with diversity. Several types of diversity factors, things outside of gender, citizenship and age, is not allowed to gather data on in Sweden compared to US or UK. Do you think that the US or UK approach should be applied in Sweden as well? Or are there other better ways to actually measure diversity?
Sure. Actually, you can do some measurements. I met with the CEO of Axfood just the other week, and they are measuring cultural diversity within the full Axfood organization. Together with local organization, you can do it not on individual level, but you can actually do it on an organization and manager level. So they have a goal that they want to reflect the Swedish society, which is that 20% of our Swedish society have 1 or 2 parents born outside of Sweden. And they have put measurements on cultural diversity. It's one of the first companies in Sweden that are taking that step. And so you can do it. You can think outside the box and actually start working on these other type of questions as well. And that's something I truly believe that we need to start doing. This is not just a gender question.
Maybe I can add something there, because I was thinking that the US-UK perspective versus Sweden. I guess that in the US-UK, when you apply, like there's a couple of questions that you can answer, right? So like, how do you identify yourself? I think I've seen that before. It's a great point. Like, is that also inclusive and like welcoming for people to say it already on an application process? And I'm not sure if that's the best way or not, but I think we can still, regardless of like official measurements, we can still acknowledge that we want to increase sexual orientation diversity inside the organization. And then how do we do this? Is that maybe we don't need to track it, a KPI to that necessarily, if that's the case, but we can still want to invest into going to pride movements or trying to understand where non-heteronormativistic humans are and sort of connect and build relationships with those people so they can keep applying and applying. So like maybe we don't need to have that measurement per se, but we can still have a stand, like we can still want to reach out to those people, if that makes sense.
Or do both.
I think that's really powerful. It's also a really good discussion. What should you actually track and what shouldn't you? And I mean, I think I remember one of my employers asked more like a question around how inclusive do you perceive this culture for example, the queer community? And then you're not actually asking the individual about like, okay, what do you identify yourself as? But you're also more asking about like, how open do you think this environment is that we're acting in? That's maybe also just my 2 cents to this question. Unfortunately, we have to round off now, but I am so happy that so many have joined us today, and I'm really thankful that Leo, Kristin and Nazanin took the time this morning for us. We would love to continue the dialogue also with the audience. So if you want to workshop together on this topic, you're curious about what we do at Wintrgarden, how we can help you, like Emma, I think you're going to post your email address in the chat so you can reach out to us there, or you can just reply to our email when we send you the summary and the recording. And we will also try to answer every question that we haven't covered in this webinar and send that out to you as an email. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope that you have all a wonderful weekend now. Thanks so much and take care, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.